Okay, we're at time, we're at quorum, we can get ourselves going and started here. Maybe we start in the middle of getting more people watching. That would be interesting with the wire.
We'll let you start.
Is there an RSA against that or anything? Probably not. Yes. Okay, it is. Let us rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have been told that at the last meeting we behaved beautifully in terms of leaning into our mics, speaking to them, turning them on and off. So here's your reminder, please hit that light before you speak, even if it's for casual things, because otherwise it's difficult for you to be picked up. If you are in the audience and have a reason to speak, come on up to the mic rather than calling out, even if we can hear you, so that people at home can catch you as well. We have two excused absences, Gina Groff and Jennifer McCormick. Let's see, public participation. Is there anybody on those blue chairs who would like to come forward and speak as a member of the public? Seeing none, I will close public participation. We have a pretty straightforward agenda tonight. Was there anything that people wanted to suggest in terms of changes to the lineup for this commission? Great. Okay.
Naomi, yes, would you have any extra copies of the agenda?
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole bunch right there that didn't show up.
I'm sorry, that's right.
Here, we'll start here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It was probably one of their turns for snacks too.
Okay. Prior meeting follow-ups. As we've been going through these meetings, it just seemed to be a useful thing to put there since I tend to have some business anyway to catch up on, and there are a few items for this evening that have pages in your packet. The first one is a timeline document. It says ongoing and budget participation at the top. It looks kind of like this one. Did you find that one in your stuff? Please understand this is my own drawing. This is my own mock-up of the process. This is not drawn from RSA or anything of that sort. I had a few conversations over the last week that reminded me that I was taking for granted the process we're going through from week to week, the order, what it's for, and what the end result is. So I thought I'd sketch it out so that it would make sense to everyone involved. Mostly what this is meant to show is that this committee is most active as in these particular meetings happen in what we tend to fondly call budget season. And that is a number of months when the budget is being looked at and proposed. In that time, it tends to divide into groups. We have initial meetings, usually in this year, it was November and December, where we do our groundwork. We're currently in the information gathering phase. This is where the questions came in. The questions that I was getting were, are you going to change anything? Or are you just going to listen? Well, the answer is, right now we're listening and taking notes, asking for additional information, asking for clarifications, gathering everything we want to have in order to enter the drafting of the budget, which will happen when we enter the work session, the public hearings, and the final votes. And so at this point in time, you should be asking for stuff if you want it or need it. And you've been seeing some. We've asked for documents and we've received them, and I'll go over those in a moment. And making sure that you have everything you need to make those kinds of decisions. So that's this, just a quick little visual guide to that. The next one is a table. It's a table called Budget Committee Requests for Supplementary Information. This is a table that I've made of the requests that have been made and filled so far. It's nice to see that they have been. It's nice to see what we have asked for and your peers have asked for. So just for your information, the documents that we've worked with so far, we received the binder from the district, which has the draft of the budget request. We've also actively received, I'm just going to go through these so that people who don't have the document can hear it. The contents of that binder in Excel format, expenditures for the 23-24 year. We've received documentation for 5-year comparisons of past expenditures, comparative enrollments for the past year. We've received expanded information on technology plan for the CIP. That document is in your packet tonight as well, an overview of the technology piece. We're going to be hearing more about the unified arts structure. We'll talk about that as well. And we've also received supporting documents in terms of how generic line increases are calculated. We'll talk about those a little bit more tonight as well. So quite a few documents. If there are more, I suggest that the best way, you are free to talk with whoever you like, whenever you like, but it seems to work very well if you funnel it through me or let me know you've asked. Otherwise, people are asking for the same document and creating more work for those who are gathering them. So if you have more items that you have asked for and received, feel free to let me know so I can grow this list. I think it's a nice record of the collaboration between the different bodies working on the budget. Thoughts or questions on this?
Correct me if I'm wrong, right? You may be correcting me. Didn't we also ask Naomi to talk to the school board about the gifted and talented conversation that we had? Should that be on this list as well, or?
Good idea, yes, I will add that. Anything else that slipped off there that would be useful in that bit? Next, as I mentioned, we have a follow-up document from technology. That is the overview of the technology capital improvement plan. We asked for a bit more detail in terms of what pieces were done. He did give us a much more comprehensive list also out loud that is on YouTube to be watched if you want to rewatch that piece. And finally, we have a contribution from our superintendent and the central district in regard to consumer price index trends, which provides us with some of the graphs that talk about how the items, when they say the cost has just increased for this category, what that means. And I did ask if they might speak a little bit to an example tonight to show us how those work. Is that something you could do? Yeah. If you'd be willing to at this time, that'd be great. Okay.
Yeah, so.
We have copies here of the main
Okay.
piece. Do you need one, Matt?
Let the, we'll present to you some additional information that is put together. Instead of tiptoeing through these.
Yeah, don't walk
wires,
through don't walk through the wires. Clearly.
Yeah, we have a list of the information that you use.
Mary, do you want me to give them my copy?
They keep
Take one out of the packet.
Okay, I was gonna take
one. Or,
That's okay.
take whatever.
And we'll start bringing copies for you. Like,
Thank you for giving us an opportunity to present this information. I think a lot of people sometimes, taxpayers and other interested parties, think that we just simply engage, school districts just simply engage in incremental budgeting, just taking a random number, adding more and more and more and more each year. But what we're trying to do is look at the data, particularly from sources like the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the Federal Reserve Board. And for the most part, it presents accurate and reliable data on how prices of various commodities and services that we consume as consumers have trended for over a number of years. I presented to you and the school board, I think it was last week, so we can have some of the graphs from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that showed pretty much a consistent trend upward in those prices. Some are continuing upward, fairly sharply. Some are beginning to level off a little bit from what was it, an extraordinary difficult period during the pandemic where there were shortages, supply chain issues on everything from paper to computers to not. He was telling me the HVAC equipment that was took months and months and months to as a result of supply chain issues. That has also put together in some bar graph format some of the actual spending that we have done. So the important message that we'd like to deliver is there is a method to the budgeting here. We try to be as concise as possible. We try not to overinflate the budget because that does not necessarily serve us well with respect to the acceptability by the school board, by you, and by the taxpayers in town. Our job, as you know, is to represent the needs of students. And that's what we think we have done well in the last couple of years. As you know, we've done an excellent job, Amy, of upgrading our curriculum, and we're not stopping now, we're going to continue. Because honestly, we have been lagging in some areas of the curriculum. You know how reliable Matt has been for many years. We've been having fiscal abnormality with him being in control of the finances. And so, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we budget according to student needs, because that's what we focus on. I have to be honest with you, I don't present a budget that represents political safety. Okay? That's the wrong reason for budget figures. We present a budget after listening to all of the staff, talking to some of the students, talking to parents, talking to you, talking to the school board, and understanding what the actual needs of our children are, whether it's preschool or whether it's grade 12 and everywhere in between. So this is not a random process for us. There's a science to it. And that science is talking to people and respecting their opinions. Looking at the data, state assessment data, looking at formative assessment data. Those are the conversations with the staff are invaluable in terms of we're doing well, but where do we need to improve? What are the needs of the students, certainly whether they're academic in nature or behavioral in nature? Therefore, what do we think we need to do to address those issues? I will always refer you back to that statement by Thomas Armstrong that I always put at the beginning of each budget book in terms of the complexity of putting together a school budget. Those of us who have 3, 4, 5, 6 children in our families know that they're all different. Multiply that by about 1,000 times, and that's what we're dealing with in the school system. So with that, I'll stop talking. It's just that I'd like to try and tell you the passion that we put behind developing the budget that we pass. It's not just that book of numbers, which doesn't say anything to you. It's what those numbers represent in terms of children and children's progress and staff well-being. So we're glad to answer any questions that you have. Matt has set forth some good diagrams in terms of our actual spending over the last 7 years.
Thank you. What I tried to do is take some of the graphs that Bill had put together and categorize them. You look at the first one you have is furniture. You can see how that has gone up over the years. You see the big spike in 2021. That's when you couldn't buy a desk to save your life, and the prices just increased incredibly. I tried to normalize this for the amount that we were buying, because some years we were replacing a classroom, some years we were buying more, so I tried to kind of factor that in. But prices have gone up considerably over the years. Of course, insurance, everybody knows about health insurance. Our guaranteed maximum rate increase is 15.9% this year, and the one last year was 8%. A couple of years ago, we even had a negative number. So it all changes. So this is just to show you the trend. The medical trend in the industry is usually always higher. Prescription drug costs, people who put off elective procedures, due to the pandemic are now going forward and getting them done. So that's a big item to talk about and to be aware of. And the educational supplies, you know, I mean, we're buying probably the same amount of supplies per pupil, but the cost of that is increased. You know, in the budget, we have like a 15% increase. And when you go to 22-23 plus 23-24, we're not done spending yet. And so we're trying to figure out what 24-25 is going to be based upon past history, and everything tells us it's going to be more. I don't think there's anybody on this committee that believes the prices are going to fall down into the cellar on any of these items. So these are just a graphical kind of view of what we were talking about in Bill's overview that he gave. So just to kind of give you a representation of the data.
May I just make one more comment? Some of these market prices, as you know, I'm not telling you anything new, depend on international dynamics of supply and demand. Take the country of China. China is one of the largest, if not the largest consumer of paper produced in this country. Because although they have a large geographical land mass, the amount of trees for forestation is relatively small compared to this country. And so they have to import many tons and tons of paper every year. And even though we're in a digital age, if you look around what we have in front of us, we still very much depend on paper. And emerging economies now are growing faster and faster because of the digital age, where it used to take them 5, 10, 15 years to grow and sustain that growth. Now in the digital age, with simulating technology, communications, etc., that growth is much, much more accelerated. What I'm getting at is thus the need for more products and services from other emerging countries too. 50, 60 years ago, we were facing that issue. Now we are. So there's a lot that comes into play, not only in our map, on the world region, not only nationally, but internationally. It impacts supply and demand conditions and pricing in the markets.
One of the things I liked about the information that you shared earlier and shared tonight as well is I know that when I don't have more specific numbers, tend to kind of in my own mind look to inflation. And so I'll do a kind of this expense that they say has risen simply because it's up say 15%, and I know inflation's at 15%, why is this 15%? And what you sent shows the specificity. So consumer price indices track specific things, such as furniture, such as educational supplies, and it can be broken down to see what the numbers are likely to be specifically for that. And I like very much having that to reference or to have a sense of rather than that broad unified number. I think it gives a much clearer picture.
Yeah, I think people tend to, well, the CP, the Consumer Price Index, is only 2.5%. Why is everything up so much? You know, you've got to look a little more than the big broad number. You even can go by region, the Northeast region, and break it down. I don't know how many different categories they have, but they have quite a few. They get hundreds of categories that get specific that each industry can look at. So we've been fighting that battle for a long time. The CPI is 1.5, but not for us because we buy, instead of screws, washers, and bolts, we buy educational supplies, we buy software, we buy technology, we buy health insurance, we buy staff, right, that are capital investment in our kids' future. So it's a little different in this industry.
Any other thoughts or questions?
Thank you both for presenting this information. The one thing, so Matt, I think I heard you say on the bar graphs that some of these you tried to normalize. So these are the actual expenditures then for each.
These are actual, but with a little flair because I knew what was going on during that year.
Okay. And then are you showing these all, like, did you bring them back into kind of the same pricing year, or do these all have the inflation and escalation baked into the prices? So sometimes it's easier when we say we normalize.
This was actually the actuals.
The actuals, okay.
Just taking out any bumps that occurred.
Okay, so it wasn't removing escalation or inflation?
Correct.
Okay, just the, got it, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, I think we'll move on to the middle school presentation, please. Yeah, because we're going to clock.
So quiet in here.
Really good.
Rachel, I believe you're the lead for that particular one. Would you prefer that the school speak first and give an overview, or would you like to?
Myself, microphone. This works all right.
Introduce yourselves and give us your.
Absolutely. Good evening. My name is Curtis Bozeman. I'm the principal at Merrimack Middle School. I'm joined by 1 in a million assistant principal. This is Kathy Hoppa joining me tonight. We had a really nice opportunity to meet with our liaison team the other week about our budget that we wanted to present to you folks tonight, that we can move forward with to help better our students and our school. And just before we begin, since it was interesting when I was walking in, Amy had referenced me as being the new principal of the middle school, and while that's true, it almost doesn't feel as new anymore. I think part of that is because when we first got here, everyone was so warm and welcoming, and you just really get a sense of the support from the community and the support from the teachers and the students. So it feels like it's been home for a long time already. So. And just to kind of paint a picture for those of us who haven't been in the middle school in a while, just wanted to kind of touch base a little bit about what the semesters look like. And I apologize for any redundancy. This is the same kind of things I was talking about at the board meeting the other day, but I think it's important to talk about where we are in our school and sort of what we've been focused on and the work we've done from the beginning of the year until now, and we'll kind of lead us into the business for tonight. One of the really exciting things when I joined was knowing that last year, the students working in a nice exercise in student voice worked together to come up with our guiding principles, our guiding values about what it would mean to be a positive middle school for both the students and the staff, and they boiled it down into 4 words. So that's kind of been our mantra for this year, is our 4 words. And the first word that they came up with was maturity. And they felt that being a young adolescent coming into middle school, it was important to have a sense of maturity, following expectations, the social expectations, and learning those and exercising those. And so through the work of Ms. Hoppa, our new Dean of Students, Patrick Jennings, who joined us this year, put together some strong systems really invested in kind of universal expectations of, what it means to be a strong student, being able to follow our expectations so you can learn at a high level. And we're happy to report that in the multi-tiered systems of support world, where they recommend that 80% of your student body have 0 to 1 office discipline referral, or 1 write-up. And they say that as a telltale sign of a strong universal intervention is having 80%. We're at 91% right now of our students have 0 to 1 discipline referral. So that, in my opinion, speaks to the commitment of not only the leadership team that put it together, but the teachers and the staff who emphasize the 4 words, and the students themselves for buying in and really wanting to make their words come true. So that was kind of our first word, maturity. And it's not an easy thing, which leads us to our second word, is determination. And we feel that was a very strong part of the middle school experience. And we have, we challenge our students every day, rigorous curriculum, exciting and challenging extracurriculars. And we emphasize that, you're not going to get it right the first time all the time. That's not what it's about. It's about kind of facing that adversity and overcoming those challenges and being determined to not take no for an answer and seek that extra help that you need. And what we've seen is students excelling in the classroom. We've celebrated our state championship soccer team. We celebrated our state championship runners. We had a tremendous concert with our chorus and our band and our jazz band. And those types of accomplishments do not happen overnight, and they don't happen just by waking up and doing it. So students were determined to achieve their goals and to work hard. And so we have been celebrating being determined as part of our middle school experience. And I think what speaks to the fact that we were so successful and determined is our third word, which is support. And they want a supportive school, and students want to support each other, student to student, on the field, in the band room, in the classroom. But what we've also seen is tremendous support from our teachers and our staff. And we hold our teachers and staff up to anybody. They are willing to do whatever it takes to meet our students where they're at, to challenge them, to get them to reach their goals. We have an incredibly supportive family and communities, families and community that are helping to support us, that are participating, that come to our games, come to our events. It's just been tremendous. And I think that support helps to encourage the determination, helps to encourage the success. And our fourth principle is that the students want to have fun. And so part of the middle school experience is making some lasting memories. We've had a school dance, we've had some really fun assemblies, door decorating contests, spirit days. We had some really fun events that are taking place. We're having raffles that are going on for celebrating the students who are getting the job done every day. So it just feels like a really positive place at the middle school right now. So I know that wasn't exactly part of our budget, but I felt it important to kind of describe where we were at here. And so kind of moving into the business, transitioning into it, we believe that all those things won't happen if our school isn't safe, and if our school isn't secure. And we know that is such a critical, important thing. I heard a phrase that I believe in where, as a school, we're responsible for keeping our students safe and providing them a great education, and kind of in that order. We can't give them a great education if they're not safe and secure and feel that sense. So we spent a lot of time this fall really trying to flesh out and perfect our school safety protocols and procedures. We worked with Lieutenant Wyman of Merrimack Fire and Detective Vanderside from Merrimack Police to really fine-tune some of our procedures. This was a really interesting thing. We went down to Bishop Field, which is our off-site evacuation rally point. So if we ever have to leave the site of the middle school, this is where we rally, is at Bishop Field, just right at the end of Madeline Bennett Drive there. And it's interesting because there's a sidewalk that comes from the school down to the lights. But then you have to kind of take a left, and there's no sidewalk to get into Bishop Field. And we were meeting with the town early this fall, kind of more thinking about where to put the snow, and so that we could have room and things, so that we're kind of working on plowing. But then we realized that we needed a path from the sidewalk to kind of cut into Bishop Field parking lot. That made a lot of sense. And the town, just on their own decision, said, you know what, we need that, and we're going to build that. And so they carved out a path, they leveled the ground, they did ADA compliant. And even though it seems like a simple thing to talk about a path, what a gesture we felt that made. Just what a commitment from the town to say that we care so much about the safety and security and making sure that the students have everything they need, that we are going to commit to making that a safe and accessible thing for us. So in that same vein, we were so excited about that we exercised our off-site evacuation drills to tremendous success. We provided the students a lot of education around those things, our families as well, with some communication home. And it was very successful. And whenever you run a drill, as you know, it's not just about having a drill to say you have it, but it's also about looking back at those procedures and dissecting it and where can you improve, so on and so forth. And we had one drill where it became apparent that we needed to find a better system for student accountability. Students we have 500 students, and some might need to sign up to the office or the guidance counselor, the library, or to their lockers, whatever it might be. And so we found, if a student signed out somewhere, right now we have paper sign-out sheets by the door where a student will sign out, get a slip of paper, and then head out. But as we have these emergency procedures, we don't always grab our signage sheet, or we might go somewhere else. And so one of the things that we wanted to explore was a way to find that accountability for students. And one of the things that we stumbled upon, which we're pretty excited about, is this electronic hall pass software. What it can do for us is it can provide us a snapshot of where every student is in the building at any time. So rather than the traditional scribble on a note sheet, They write their name on their computer, or the teacher will do it for them, and send them out to where they need to go, and then, in the blink of an eye, and anyone with access can see where each and every student is at any moment. So if there ever is an emergency, and we are in Bishop Field or wherever it might be, and there's a student who's unaccounted for, we can look and say, oh, they assigned out to the library, and then we can help to try to locate them pretty quickly. It was something that was a pretty big selling point for myself, was the idea of knowing where each student was and having that accountability. And that was only the tip of the iceberg, because as we were exploring this new software and this new system, we found that it also held tremendous potential for student interventions. So one of the other things it does is it takes kind of the data of what would be on your sign-out sheet and kind of calculates it pretty quickly. So if there's a student who's struggling in math or a student struggling in science, we can look back and say they've missed, they go to the bathroom during science class every day, and, you missed this many minutes of instructional time. And it can provide a data point. It's not a cure-all, but it will at least provide us some more information for when we try to help support students. Some students, believe it or not, go to the bathroom every single period of the day. And so this will kind of help to kind of track that and to monitor that and to at least give us something to talk about. What eHallPass is not, is it is not microchipping students. It is not something that we are doing to them. And we're not giving them all an air tag, so we know where they are at every moment. It is not what that is. Think about it as almost like taking our sign-out sheets and turning them into a Google Doc, like a live document that we can access at any point. Students are not carrying a digital pass on their phones. We're in a away for the day school. We have our personal devices away for the day. But what it does is it allows the teachers to alert the office or the nurse or the library wherever a student is going that they're on their way, and then it kind of keeps the keeps the accountability there, which is pretty promising for us. And we were excited about that. We had a nice we have an opportunity to have a school-wide pilot, a 30-day pilot this spring, and we're excited about exercising. We just had a training today with our staff, and there's some good feedback from the staff about the potential that this could have for us. So that was kind of our one of the things that we wanted to present to this group about today was the electronic hall pass. Moving on to a couple of other things that we wanted to talk about, and I'll just explain a few things before we get into some question and answer, is that the next piece is, if safety is number one for us, curriculum and a strong, rigorous curriculum is something that is going to be second. And so we wanted to put in a couple of extra materials and learning materials for students, particularly in science and social studies. And what those are they're subscriptions, they're periodicals. In the science classes, it's Science World is a periodical that is an annual subscription. It does provide students some real-time applicable science that is new and fresh and current and appealing to kids. Sometimes engaging middle school kids can be its challenge in itself, so this is providing something that is real-time and taking what they're learning in the classroom and giving an example of a real-life application of it. It also encourages some strong textual study, which is, again, with our new adoption of iReady and being able to find out specifically where students need extra support in literacy. This can provide some content area literacy in the sciences for them. And that was something that we've had in the science department for a while. However, it's always been kind of a beg, borrow, and steal to try to find the money to pay for. It's never been a line item in the budget. It just felt appropriate to put it in there because it is something that we find a lot of value in, and it's something that we want to be able to pursue. So we felt it necessary to put that in there. And with social studies, it's another periodical, but it's more of a digital periodical called Junior Scholastic, which is, they have paper copies, but we're hoping to get the digital version. And the reason we're hoping for that is with the new push for civics education in 8th grade, this can provide some really nice materials that are dynamic. And so it's not just off of the text, but there's also pictures and graphs and interactive on our Chromebooks that kids can take home with them. And one of the really exciting pieces is that it has varying reading levels. So it makes it a little bit more accessible to students. And sometimes that that higher level civics or that higher level social studies is not always accessible, and this is going to make it a little bit more readily available for those students in need. Aligns right with our C3 framework, and also similar to the Science World, has the literacy skills and the literacy practice that our data is showing our students need, and this will be a nice supplement for that. And so from science and social studies, we wanted to move into our fine arts. Again, something that we really enjoy, our performing arts, something that we really hang our hat on. And like I said earlier, if you've been to one of our concerts, it shows these students love it. It's highly, there's a lot of activity around it. We have 77 band students this year, which from what I gather is a pretty high number, 29 band students. And right now we have 17 percussionists, which is a lot for a band. Next year, we're anticipating having 20 percussionists. And one of the things that we're finding we need is an additional set, of performing bells for us to play on. Right now we have one set, which is for, a normal size percussion, not a MMS size percussion. And it was purchased back when the school was built in 2004, and it was built to last, and it's gonna last. It's one of those, buy it once and it's done. It's a high quality bell set, and we were hoping to replicate that because it's a need that we want to have, and we want to have as part of our band, and we want it to last. Believe it or not, middle school students might not always be as careful with things, and something like a percussion instrument is something that can take a beating. And so they wanted to really replicate the same quality of bell set that we currently have. So then that way, we buy it nice rather than buy it twice. We can make sure that we have it then for forever. So that was a line item that you'll see in our budget proposal. And then shifting over to chorus, this is something that our chorus room does not have, and it is a cabinet for sheet music. And this is something that belongs in a chorus room, just as a piano belongs in a chorus room. One of these cabinets for sheet music belong in a chorus room. Chorus music and a music folder is a little bit different size. It's a very specific size, and our chorus has increased from 12 students in 2021 to 34. So it's almost tripled in size. And we're hoping that continues. And as that, more students means more paper, means more sheet music, means the need for this cabinet. We don't have a dedicated chorus room at the moment. So this is something that Mr. McGinnis, our chorus instructor, would like to get on wheels so that for some reason, if we ever need to move it and transport it, we have it. Built to last, a one-time purchase. Very similar to, like I said, a piano or a sync in a science lab. It's something that someone in a chorus program has in their chorus room. So that was something else that felt was important for our curriculum to have. And then kind of our last little bit that we wanted to discuss was maintenance for some educational material, specifically in tech ed, where we have a 3D printer that is unfortunately gone obsolete. It was kind of purchased when 3D printers it's over 10 years old, something that, technology advances so rapidly, as we know. And it was something that being able to find repair parts and materials for it has just gotten so expensive because it is an outdated machine that unfortunately, we have 500 students who come through tech ed every year, and right now 0 students are able to access it because we don't have the materials to put it together. And so with the new 3D printer, that turns from 0 students participating with it to 500. And so that's something we wanted to update in this budget cycle. And additionally, our bandsaw is also unfortunately over 10 years old. And this is, again, a safety requirement that needs to be updated. This current one doesn't have any vacuums or HEPA filters for, the dust that it provides, or creates rather. So getting a new bandsaw will not only keep it more safe with the most up-to-date safety procedures for kids and for adults, but also for air quality as well. So that was something that we were requesting. And then instrument repairs was a line item that we needed a little bit more enhancement on, as well as our cafeteria tables. We replace 2 cafeteria tables a year. These is, again, part of our furniture replacement plans that we've put together to be able to update our cafeteria tables, which are not, unfortunately, a cheap thing, but also important to have. And, we've had them for years as well. So those were kind of our 3 categories, was our maintenance and repair, our curriculum and school safety. And so we had a nice meeting with our liaison team to kind of go over some details about that. So I hope that was a adequate overview of where we're at right now. And turn it over to you folks.
Thank you, Chris. So that was a very good overview. I think you've done such a good job. I probably don't have much to add, but I will, add on a little bit more of our conversation as well. So our liaison team was myself, Ellen, and Naomi. And Kathy was there as well during our meeting. So we did spend a lot of time up front talking about the E-Hall Pass. And you did a really good job of explaining everything again. One thing that that came up as like another little third bonus perk to that, I think as well, was that this software also allows students and or staff members, more so the staff members, to schedule if they have recurring tag ups or meetings with certain students, that they can put that into the software, and then that pops up a meeting reminder for the students, so that they can see that throughout the day and know when that's coming. So I think that was one little extra bonus to that software. And we did get to talk about the different types of passes for that software. So it was more of, how does the software work in terms of that accountability? And so there's, I think, 3 different types of tickets. And those tickets can be a one-way ticket. It can be a round trip ticket, a layover ticket. Thank you. Anyway, I'd forget it. And so, yeah, I thought that was pretty neat too, because we know that there's, kids go to different places for different reasons. So it seems like a pretty robust piece of software that's going to provide that safety, but also provide some perks also in that intervention and just for the student use as well. So then moving on to the curriculum piece, the discussion there was always just asking and making sure that teachers and staff and the administration asked for, what they actually needed, and that they felt that they were not shorting themselves on materials and or curriculum needs of the students, so that the students could engage in and access their learning as needed. And right now it seems like they were, but there was an action if there was anything else that came of that they would let the committee know if there was any additional requests. But the subscriptions that were asked for at this point seemed sufficient. Moving on to the music piece of this, it actually drove a conversation. I'm going to start with the choral cabinet, because that actually was an interesting discussion that we had in terms of, the chorus, they meet at the beginning of the day and they're in a classroom. So they don't have, the band has a nice band room, but the chorus, they are put into a classroom. So that kind of drove discussions around learning what the choral sheet music cabinet was, and there's permanent fixtures versus moving ones, but just what would it take, what would be needed for a room dedicated for the chorus, because as the music program expands, I'm sure sometime in the near future there might be a need for that, and we know Merrimack has a really fantastic music program, so getting those kids ready in middle school to move up to the high school and maybe even to professional or into their college years, starting them at a young age, getting them prepped of, what to expect moving up through. So we had some really good discussions around that as well. And then the bell set, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was, we've had a bell set for 20 years. It's still going strong. We need that type of, equipment, that durability, so that kids coming up into the program get the same access to the types of instruments that are being offered. And there's not, I can almost see, instances where kids will fight again. It'll kind of regress into that, well, I want the nice set, not the new, even though it's new, it might not be, you might be able to tell the difference. So there was just some discussion around that as well. And lastly, I won't talk, I think you've hit upon all the tech ed, pieces of equipment that we needed. But one thing that we did talk about that you didn't get to mention was just the co-curriculars. And that has been a conversation that's been had at every department level for all the schools. And it was something that we asked because on some of the, let me grab the page number. I think it's page 2. Nope, sorry, might be, I need the flags like Naomi. There we go. It's page 1. I should have remembered that. So on page 1, the co-curricular funding has been requested for the stipends for the staff, but with the middle school, they operate a little bit differently in that the district helps offset some of the co-curricular cost for programs, if I'm saying that correctly. And so there was just a discussion around that as well. And I think one that we might further want to talk about tonight, especially with Matt and Bill being here as well. So with that, I believe that was my summary. I will turn it over to Ellen and or Naomi to provide anything that I may have forgotten.
So one minor thing, in the subscriptions, if I remember correctly, I think it's important to note that while you're asking for things that are needed and wanted, there is still frugality there. I believe that you mentioned that these copies would be shared. Was I right about that?
Yes, we could. They were hoping to get at least one class set, if that was all we could get, just regular around. But if we could get 90 of them, now you're talking the whole team can have those. So that was something that they were hoping for.
Thank you.
Well, mine's probably going to be Matt's involvement. Because the middle school, so I've been the middle school PTG president for, I don't know, forever now, since my oldest was in 7th grade, because I just love that school. It's near and dear to my heart. Love these guys. They always want a guest speaker, but they never have enough money for it, ever. So I'm confused about where the money comes from in the district, how it goes into the school, can it be aligned? Like, how do the elementary schools get their guest author? Some of it I know is paid for by the parent-teacher groups, but they say some of it's paid for by the district. And how do we get them? Because fortunately, we've been able to support them through the PTG, but we can't always do that. And guest speakers are only increasing in price, and they have great feedback, great interaction with the students. It's one of the things that's really good, even the one questionable one several years ago that used a lot of swear words, but the students always have good feedback about it. So how do we provide that? Because I know that having my children gone through the school, that's one thing that they love, their friends love, and they always have some experience that they bring with them and continues on.
Well, there's nothing that's preventing the school from using their community relations line, or there's nothing that's preventing the school from using their field trip line. So as opposed to a field trip where they go someone, they bring a speaker in. We've had a history of doing that for decades, especially during the COVID era when no one was doing field trips because no one wanted anybody out and about to bring in a speaker. That's how it was used. So it's at the school's option.
So where are those for reference? Like on the pages, do we know?
Field trips are usually 8519 accounts. Huh? Okay. Is it an 8519 account? Object code? Middle school really cut out their field trips years ago. I don't know if it's back in the book. I don't have it.
Yeah, they are.
But it,
The field trips are
I know.
the field trips, and I've got to find the page, but
There's
they're for
community
specific
relations.
locations. Yeah.
So field trips are spoken for, but community relations, what do you do with that? I'm just trying to figure out how to get them what they want.
well, there's a lot of flexibility in the bottom line of the budget. If they want a guest speaker, I don't think we would turn that down. Community relations is to do stuff that, obviously, by virtue of its name, that brings the community in.
Okay.
And so parent, teacher, organization, groups, etc. It could be a speaker. It could be a lot of things, especially when you're inviting the community to hear a speaker along with the kids to hear a speaker. So it could be used for that. And it's delightfully vague that gives the school the option to pick and choose what they want. There's nothing in the budget for anyone for guest speakers in the entire district.
Got it.
I can state that for a fact.
Ellen, it's on page 12.
I got that.
It's
Thanks.
account 8611.
Yep.
$1,452 for
Yep.
community relations.
So that line is currently being, or at least in the last year we have it, it was expended. So I'm assuming it wasn't expended on the speaker, or was it? Do we know? This may be something that has to be dug into a bit more outside of this meeting.
Yeah, you don't have to answer it right this second, but
But I'd be curious not only to know that, but Ellen, if it's something that you and others might want to look into, is where do the elementary schools put that? And ultimately, is it comparable? Is it something that needs to be looked at as an expense? What would it look like? I mean, it might be worth a bit of a look.
because I struggle a little bit with the middle school because the community kind of wants to view them as a little older elementary and not really blooming young adolescents, young adults, like going into high school. So they still need that kind of comfy support, but they also need that initiative and that push to get their, accountability, autonomy, and advocacy that they need to be strong young adults. So I don't know. That's just my thing. I know. See, I might vote for something.
I have one other question that didn't come up, but that occurs to me partly on a side conversation on the high school, but has come up other ways as well. You mentioned the 3D printer, which certainly would be useful. I think that in this time, there's more and more of a sense of not having knowledge of where a piece of technology falls. If it falls under a technology line, it falls under a curricular line, does it fall under a personal possession piece? Is it part of the library? Is it part of a classroom? At the middle school level, could you talk a little bit, or maybe this is a district issue, of where those lines are? As in that the 3D printer is its own thing as opposed to, say, part of the technology CIP and pieces of that sort?
I'm coming. Don't worry. If the 3D printer is part of the tech ed program, it belongs in the tech ed program. They have tech ed and they have family consumer science. They're two rooms that are adjacent, connected by a shared room. Years ago, we had a program called Synergistic Systems, where it was all computer-based. Family consumer science was a lot of kind of food science, etc. And over the years, that kind of morphed into washing machines, sewing machines, and bandsaws, because that technology and that program, I guess, it wasn't. It didn't stand the test of time, I guess, with the changing faculty and whatnot. At one point in time, the Department of Ed came down and lauded us for it, but then it changed over the course of the year. So if you have a 3D printer and it's for tech ed, right, then it belongs in the tech ed line, not the district technology line.
Thank you. Shall we open it to others? Okay, any other thoughts or questions from the committee?
See, I told you that opening would kill it.
I have a couple of questions, and thank you both for being here. And I appreciate the summary for those of us that don't have kiddos yet in the middle school that will be forthcoming. That was a very great insight, valuable insight. So thank you very much for that. My questions are kind of silly of sorts, but you're very specific on one of your line items talking about health supplies. You need 15 cases of water. Is that, and so my question was, well, if we're very specific about 15 cases of water, my next question is that enough, right? Do you need more than 15 cases of water in the matter of a year, right? So again, I'm sure you have plenty of students that don't have refillable water bottles, and that's what you're trying, and that's fabulous. But if you're doing that every day, or if that's happening all the time, something tells me you may need more than 15 cases.
What line is that, Michelle? Do you know?
I'm on page 8,
Thank you.
and it's account 8610 for $881.
So yes, we do encourage the refillable bottles. And of course, if you have a parent, you know the Stanley Cups are the things to have, right? So our kids don't typically want the disposable ones, but Nurse Davenport is detail oriented, and I'm confident she tracked them for many years and knows exactly how much water she needs. So yes, I would be confident in that number.
Okay.
And it really is for kind of emergency situations where kids are overheated or have forgot their water bottle or something
Sure.
like that.
Yeah, I'm not discounting that
Yeah.
you need it. I'm just
Yeah.
like, okay, well, do you need more? Because
Wait till
that's,
you meet that nurse. You will
She's
never
a
ask
force.
that question.
That is a good question. Thank you.
And my second question is on page 11 when you're talking about what is the middle school's uniform replacement cycle plan? So I think it's just for uniforms. I apologize. I didn't write all of it in my notes. Oh, the athletic supplies on page 11. And it says including uniforms as designated in the Merrimack Middle School uniform replacement cycle plan.
Yeah, thank you. And while I don't have that in front of me, so I apologize for that, I can certainly get that to you. Athletic Director Babin purchased new cheerleading uniforms for this year, the Spirit team, and because he said they were up next, and there's a kind of making sure that it's not all at once, so it doesn't all get the hit all at once. So I can work to try to grab that information for you.
Yeah, I would just like to know, because I know sometimes, right, that's the best intentions, right? You try to cycle things through, but it doesn't always. I would hate for, the cheerleaders to get their uniforms, but yet you had 20 basketball shirts or whatever that ripped, but they don't get them because they're not in the plan or whatever.
Yeah.
That's all I
And
was.
sometimes it might be like one or two incidental ones that might need it, but
Sure.
every now and again we have to do the whole set and update them also. I can work to get that for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
That'd be great, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing kind of the state of the middle school and what you've been focusing on and what you've done since arriving here in the district. So thank you very much for all of that. It's definitely appreciated, and the passion that you both show for your students shines through. I did have a question. I was at the school board meeting where you had both presented, and it was regarding the online subscriptions. I believe for social studies, there was mention that they were also kind of being used as a stopgap to RSA that had recently passed. Could you just share a bit about that so people understand the additional need for those subscriptions?
I can. I know Amy Doyle can speak much more articulately. But basically, they changed the sequencing of the social studies curriculum in the RSA such that a whole chunk, the civics unit, was moved to 8th grade. And so we're trying to absorb that in different ways, and one of which is through the magazine subscription. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
She's at the ready.
She was ready.
All set? Okay. I think that's it. That's all we have for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, let's move on to the high school, please.
Madam Chairwoman,
Dan.
I'd like to suggest that we change this up just a little bit, because these two individuals, along with Steve Clare, sat with us for 2 hours and answered every question we had about their budget. And I have notes of that meeting, and I would suggest that to let them off the hook a little bit, that I would go through those notes of that meeting, and then if there are any questions, we address those from there.
Does that work well for you? Excellent. Sounds good to me.
What? Yeah. And in lieu of time and everything else. But first, I want to thank you and Steve for the time you gave us and your openness in answering the questions that we had. It was wonderful. With us at that meeting were Rachel. We had Ellen's questions. Ellen could not make it, but Heather took her questions and presented them to the committee. So I think we covered all of the bases. So the meeting was held on Friday, January 12th at 11 a.m. with Steve Clare, Jill Hanlon, Richard Zampieri, myself, Heather, and Rachel attending. The meeting ended at 12:50, so just about 2 hours. Ellen Wilson, who had asked to join this committee, was unable to attend because of a work issue, but did provide a number of questions to be asked. After introductions were made, Heather Robitaille asked Ellen's questions. Ellen's first question was, monitoring the school via video coverage was discussed. They need some equipment, which is understandable. I'm curious how students are currently accounted for. After watching the middle school presentation, what about something like ePass in the future? How are students currently tracked in the building? And is this something you could use additional assistance on, or is their current system fine? The answer was, most of the school is monitored by about 40 cameras. Duty teachers are currently stationed in the hallways and areas of high traffic. Merrimack High School administration has heard about EasyPass with mixed reviews from Milford School District. The administration is waiting to engage with a company until they discuss the middle school's experience with the middle school administration. On a personal note, while at the high school for a different meeting, I ran into my granddaughter on her 18th birthday, and she had a pass in her hand. So it was wonderful. Ellen's second question related to alternative pathways to graduations update on the new offerings, additional implementation, types, students participating, etc., and the increase in this area for this year. Are the options as successful as you would have hoped, and are they properly funded? This line was also moved from a district line, I believe, to a high school line item. Is there a projected increase over time with popularity in this area, and are they budgeting appropriately? The answer was, the program seems to be successful, just started this year, so it's a small sample size, but it will grow. The program just graduated its first student and is believed to be successful at helping students who would otherwise drop out. It opened up a discussion of the YES program and the student support teams. They walked us through that process. It's an intervention, but it's also a process for data collection. Harley Hall also provided written details regarding the Pathways program as the school board also requested this detail and will attach her report at the end of this report. Ellen's third question was co-curricular student activity spending. The high school budget is larger, which is understandable, but is there district support of any kind for things like guest speakers, challenge day, etc.? Breaking down spending further by itemizing clubs' activities, like athletics is itemized, was requested by the board, and I agree this would be nice to see. Just a little more clarification on district involved versus school or combination. They have several new options and a new position for a drama coordinator, director. This is an increase, I understand, but a little more clarification overall as mentioned, please. On a side note, the increased transportation line for transporting students to and from events practices, I understand. They have not been doing this for many years, and having younger participants be transported by older ones was how it was handled. They indicated that they had added to the budget to accommodate students getting to practices, etc. The high school team indicated that the only changes to the budget were 15% into the cost of supplies asked for by Matt. Heather indicated that she's not sure that this is a true statement, as there were various increases other than supplies. The other was the new scope, including the cost of PSATs for both 9th and 10th grade, which will be used to capture data, provide a baseline for both grade levels, as New Hampshire does not offer statewide standardized tests to assess knowledge at this level. There was a discussion about the PSATs being used by math and English department heads to analyze the results for significant commonalities that may identify deficiencies and/or strengths in instructional areas. The use of the PSATs is designed to be one data point, knowing that some students do not test well. The administration, along with the superintendent, will assess if this is the most reflective tool to use in both 9th and 10th grade as data is collected. We asked if this was their budget, and were told that the 2 items above were the only items that came from outside their teams. We went over the cover page of the high school budget and discussed each of the items. Science, the need for physical science textbooks. Tech ed, the need for a new cut-ahead on the planer. Co-curricula, the increase in both supplies and transportation. There was some discussion of the robotics team and their success at all levels, which led to some of these increased costs. Athletics, renewing the practice transportation budget. And testing, the PSATs for freshmen and sophomores. We indicated to them that our initial reading of the budget suggested that there was a lot of padding, redundancies, and/or duplication. On subsequent readings, we realized that there were multiple transportation costs, football helmets mentioned multiple times, and computer items showed up in many instances. This generated the question of why don't the computer items show up in Jason's budget, whose office is just above where we were meeting. There were a number of suggestions of why it might be, and there was an indication that the board had asked the same question, but there were no conclusions reached. We then went through the budget line by line and found that most discrepancies were the result of insufficient narratives. For instance, the property services 504 coordinator. The $46,000 had been moved to salaries. It should always have been in salaries. Testing and scoring. There is question as to whether this was required. It was not. Purchased property services, art equipment repairs. A question was raised if this was a new addition. It was not. They actually had a person on staff trying to do the repairs to this equipment and have started to decide to send the kiln out for professional repair to ensure proper safe maintenance. Family and consumer science instructional equipment repair. The increase was due to the maintenance of built-in cutting boards. The $400 last year was to purchase a new stove. Science instructional repairs. The increase is due to added maintenance of the chemical closet. Computer education repairs, administrative equipment repairs, property, computer education supplies. There was no answer as to why these items do not show up in Jason's budget. The OTH LEA, there was a question whether this was required costs and whether there might be federal aid to compensate. It is not, and there was not. Athletic transportation costs. There was a question of different bus costs by trip. It was explained that the different costs due to varying lengths of trip. For instance, if one game is in Keene and the other is in Londonderry, the costs would be significantly different. Athletic practice transportation. This was the renewed budget line for practice transportation, getting those kids who can't yet drive, get themselves there, to give them transportation to get to the sites that they need. Social studies transportation, the discrepancy was the difference were because of canceled trips in the past. Co-curricular transportation, I think this was in the middle school also. There was a felt that there's need to see a breakdown of these numbers. There was an indication that the board felt the same. SEP field trips, we asked for an explanation. It was indicated that Get Set and Bridges programs were special education programs. Tech ed supplies, the IDA computer class supplies, continued the Jason question. Property science supplies, the increased cost is due to higher costs, which our superintendent and Matt has explained. Reading supplies, Heather had a question on the fluctuation in cost here and how many students are currently receiving remedial reading instruction. It was due to fluctuation in students needing these services. Steve said he could follow up with the exact number of students receiving this instruction. Co-curricular supplies. There was a question to whether there was a redundancy here. The increased cost was due to an increased number of different clubs at the high school level. Athletic supplies. There were two questions here. One, is there a redundancy? And two, should the software here again be in Jason's budget? The increase were determined to be increased costs. The Jason question remained unanswered. Grad pathway supplies. This was a budget item moved from the student services budget. World language texts. There are currently 5 languages taught: Spanish, French, Latin, Arabic, and Mandarin. 3 of those languages are consistently well attended: Spanish, French, and Latin. Mandarin and Arabic both have less than 12 students per class. Mandarin has 26, and Arabic has 15 students total in the 4 courses offered. Full transparency here, I have a grandson in these Mandarin classes, and I can tell you, he can go to Chinatown tomorrow and handle himself there with the language he has picked up. The increase in this budget is for the purchase of Mandarin textbooks. Science texts. There was a request that all teacher materials be provided at no cost and that the cost of textbooks be negotiated. World language software, phys ed software, music software, social studies software, reading software, whole language additional equipment, tech ed additional equipment, reading additional equipment, computer ed equipment, again was the Jason question. He was sitting right above us. It was pointed out that there are teacher committees for all of these and that Jason is on every one of those committees. Athletic equipment replacement, there seemed to be a redundancy there on helmets. Graduation, was a question of what the costs were. It was explained that these rental costs were for chairs, tents, audio equipment, etc. So very, very much to. At the end of the meeting, we asked if there was a question that we did not ask that they expected us to ask. The answer was that they expected us to ask what items were not in the budget that they may have asked for. So our follow-up question was what items were not in the budget that they may have asked for. The answers were tables for the cafeteria and to update it similarly to the update that was done to the library. They also said they'd like to get the sign out front fixed. We thought we had replaced the tables last year. We understand that the sign is getting fixed. This committee would recommend that the table situation be looked at and, if feasible, be funded in this budget. Respectfully submitted by myself, Rachel, Heather. And hopefully we represented what you told us well.
I don't think we're live. It's a bummer. My fan club's out there.
Thoughts from other people who are part of that group? Please, yes.
In a couple of accounts, for example, the helmets, Dan, what school departments will generally have in the athletic department is 2 accounts for helmets, one for purchasing new helmets and a contract service for repairing existing helmets. So it may not be a redundancy. It's just that historically most school districts have procurement of new helmets, but they also have a separate account for contract services. So I just wanted to clarify that the redundancy is not necessarily redundancy. It's because we are budgeting appropriately for new procurement versus contract services for repair.
And I also wanted to pop in at this point, I think, and thoughts on this from others would be welcome as well. Where purchases such as software rest in the budget is a good and excellent question, and I share it. Ultimately, though, those expenses are fixed. Whether we increase the IT line to cover them or leave them where they are is in some ways 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's kind of a choice of practice, I think. If any of those were beyond that to questions regarding the expenditures themselves, I'd be especially interested in those pieces.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this was made worse because 2 days before, I was on the liaison committee meeting with Jason upstairs. So I was seeing many of the same type items showing up.
That makes sense.
And I think did not the board ask the same question as to where some of the computer? So it's something we should look at.
That's good, thank you. Others?
Hello. Thank you, Dan. That was very nice. I'm sorry, though. I still have questions. Seems to be my MO lately. And this may be Bill or Matt or whatever. Is there a reason why that the grad pathway budget went from student services to the high school? Was it just a placement thing so you can keep track of it?
Yes, we wanted to make sure that appropriation was in the correct program. It is not a special education program. It's a general education program.
Thank you. And this may just be an educational thing for myself. Again, I'll tell you what I told them. I don't have any kids in the high school yet, but someday they will get there. So this is more educational for me. Why do we pay for the SATs and why do we want to pay for the PSATs? Is there more to it other than if the state doesn't offer? I mean, when I went to high school, a couple years ago, we had to pay to take the PSATs, right? It was my responsibility, my parents' responsibility to pay for those, and I got to decide. And I see Amy standing up, so. So that was just, why, especially where the PSATs is a new item for the freshmen and sophomores.
We're trying a new trend this particular meeting, and that is asking questions that you need to answer none of them.
Question for the juniors. Oh, sorry. Thank you. The SAT question for your juniors. Previously, it was the kneecap, and that was the state assessment. They don't have that anymore, so the SAT became that state assessment for the juniors. And we used to have to pay for the writing portion, but I believe we don't have to pay for that anymore either. But the 9th and 10th graders, we at the high school, in my short tenure here, I've only been here for a year, and Amy's only been here for a year. So there's not been a baseline or any assessment for 9th and 10th graders for that progress monitoring piece, or to kind of look at our curriculum and kind of line that up to make sure that we are teaching the standards that they should be getting assessed on or being taught. Would you like to add on to that, if you will? Or
I'll just add that the narrative in that section, we don't pay for the SAT that's given in March. And to your earlier point, that is through the New Hampshire State Assessment TIDE, if you're familiar with that, parents that are out there that they log in to look at their students' results. The PSAT, we still offer on a pay basis. Students, I think, have taken it on a couple of Saturdays. We also will offer the SATs again, not as part of the state assessment, but if students want to take it again, they can register to take it and pay it on their own. The reason that we decided to add the PSATs for freshmen and sophomores is what Jill, and I know we've had lots of conversation, there is no progress monitoring data at all on those populations of students. And that's a real issue. When you have, we have great data K to 8. We used STAR for a long time, and now we've transitioned to iReady. We have a ton of information about how students are progressing so that we can target our instruction. There is a gap in 9th and 10th grade. And why we picked the PSATs rather than STAR or AIMS Web, which are other progress monitoring tools, is that it is a motivating test for students that are headed off to a 4-year or a 2-year institution. It helps them prepare. The more they're exposed to a high stakes test like the SATs, because whether we like it or not, it is the state assessment. And for some, it is a high stakes assessment. It helps them to get to know how that test is administered. They're able to practice it, the formatting. It's a long test. I think they sit for 2, almost 3 hours. And if they have accommodations, they can have more time. But we chose the PSAT because we felt like it did 2 things. It provided students with additional practice for the SAT, but also the sooner that students have a College Board account, which is initiated once they take the PSATs, they have access to a lot of other resources, whether they're going to a 4-year institution, a 2-year institution, or entering the workforce. There are a lot of information for students and families in the College Board. So yes, it is we will pay per student for that service, but we really think that it'll help fill some gaps about what students need intervention in 9th and 10th grade, because right now we just have the formative and summative assessments that are department-based, which are strong, but we have nothing that is normed to triangulate that data. And as Jill also said, this is the first time we're giving the PSAT to the total population, and then if it doesn't give us the results that we want, we won't continue to give it. But there are other high schools that do this. I think it is a best practice, especially we have a lot of students that, go on to another institution, whether it's a community college or a 4-year school. I know that there's a lot of information right now out there about schools and whether or not the SATs is an indicator. It was just on the Daily this morning. If you listen to that podcast, they were talking about SATs and what are secondary institutions going to do about it. So that is why we picked it, but it is a cost. There was not, before I came, I think it was during COVID, and Rich will have to let us know, I think he's, or Matt, I think they offered the STAR to freshmen for a short time. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay, but no one really felt motivated to look at that data, so we decided to introduce the PSAT.
Thank you. I mean, that's great then. You're trying to fill a gap, right? And I think people in the community probably need to hear that a couple of times. Like, you're not just increasing the expenditure because you want to, do some testing for the students. You're trying to fill a gap of something that's not even there for you to draw, of what they need. If we're doing it K through 8, then why do we stop at 8 and not continue? And then we have juniors and seniors take these SATs, right, that they're going to use to potentially move on to others. So thank you for that. Thank you. And then I had a question on page 7. When we're talking about providing the student transportation to like Nashua North, South, Alvern, for career technical educational programs. I mean, that's a pretty big line item based on a lot of all your other line items. So the amount of students that we have, how do students, I guess it's more education of how they're selected or how that works?
Unfortunately, we apply and send a wish list of students that want to attend the various programs in the 3 schools. We have no say in who gets accepted. So one year we might have 42, the next year we might have 58, and the next year after that we might only have 36, unfortunately. So we try to offer them from the 3 schools programs that we don't offer at the high school. Sometimes they're certified, and it's often a 2-year program, and these students use this as a leaping off point for often for careers.
So you're at the mercy of these other school districts on how many Merrimack kids can go to these?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. And then is there a specific, I would assume there's some type of specific, do we have to pay these districts as well? Is that what's also in this line item? It's not necessarily just about or this is just?
This is just the transportation.
I mean, that's a lot of money for transportation, $157,000 a year.
Well, the model of the state of New Hampshire is not to have each school have their own vocational educational program, which is what we used to call it back in the day. So they have these area programs. And if you were going to build, you have to first apply to the state to become a vocational educational center. And if you would build it, they would pay 100% of the cost. That was probably 15, 20 years ago. They don't pay that anymore, right? That's gone. And so now if you want to provide a vocational education for kids, which I believe you have to go to these sites that have been predetermined by the Department of Ed, and you're basically, you take what you can get. So that's how they do it in New Hampshire.
So if you have to, right, and we're at the power of the other school districts from a lottery perspective, what happens to those students that don't get picked for these programs?
Can't answer that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I see the logic, and obviously this isn't a Merrimack, this is obviously a Department of Education issue, but that's a problem, right? We've got probably kids that want to do these, you know, vocational educations that may not necessarily want to do the, you know, going to French class and stuff like that. They want to, you know, be more hands-on, and that's what they're more geared toward. But we're limiting those adults, children, or whatever, from getting that then if we're at the mercy of some lottery system. I mean, that just, I'm probably on my soapbox now, and I apologize for that, but that, you know, I may look at that at other avenues, but that's just, I don't think that's fair. You know, I really don't think that's fair.
We agree, and I think with the growth of the adult ed program, Harley's done a wonderful job with the ELOs, and that provides also internship opportunities. We also have a transition coordinator who works with all students. So we've had a student who couldn't get into the CTE program for the cosmetology, but wanted to try culinary, so she got a paid internship down at Buckley's. So we try to think outside the box when the kids can't or don't make the cut for the other schools. It is unfortunate that we don't have a lot of spots at the other schools.
But that puts the pressure on you.
It does.
Right? That puts the pressure on you to find other alternatives and other ways to do this, right? Because you can't give them the opportunity because it's not there.
Correct.
But they try to give them other opportunities, and they really do the best. So I was on this committee last year, and we discussed that in detail. And it's unfortunate that Steve's not here because he's really involved in that as well. But coming from a parent who's had them go through there and several friends, it's not as bad as what you kind of feel like right now. Is it ideal? No. But this team does their absolute best to get those students all those opportunities that they could have and partake in. It's not an easy task, and that's why every time I've seen this come up in my years on this committee, I never even balk at that cost because gas is expensive, bus maintenance is expensive, and those students have to get there if those opportunities are given to them. And so sometimes they do take them on field trips to these other schools too, so the students can see it ahead of time and make sure, is that really something I want to do before I put in for it, and things like that. But they really do try.
That's great.
May I just say, all of the above is correct. It's one of the most significant issues in public education right now, not only here, but in many other states, including where I worked for over 50 years, Massachusetts. The centralization of vocational technical education programs is concerning. It was done many years ago and continues because of the economies of scale issue. It's very costly for individual school districts and communities to fund vocational education opportunities. The problem is, and this is not limited to Merrimack or New Hampshire, is the selectivity in terms of admitting students. And you're absolutely correct. The alternative is that some students will drop out. We used to face that in Massachusetts. It was very frustrating because vocational programs sometimes have transitioned from what we used to know growing up as true vocational and technical trade focus to a sort of a quasi-college entrance program. And so they've become much more selective in terms of sometimes eliminating those students that really need the program the most. And that's very concerning. And the concern emanates from the fact that About 10 years ago, the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education did a study of about 1,000 corporations. 65% of the respondents said they needed students with greater vocational skills and were not able to provide that to a lot of students. And once again, it's not only in Merrimack, but it's across the region, it's across the country since we went to a centralized approach to vocational education with limited numbers of openings. It's very, very frustrating, I have to tell you, because some of those students who absolutely would thrive and be great, have wonderfully successful careers, are discouraged sometimes because they're not admitted and they sometimes drop out of school. So, we used to meet with our legislative delegation and say, look, you've got to do something about the admissions criteria and making sure that those students who need these programs the most are in fact admitted and they're not becoming more and more selective because they want to provide and attract students with the attractive option of potentially going to college beyond those programs. So it's a complicated issue. Now, the state puts a lot of emphasis on career technical education because they have required us to align our calendars, our school calendars, to the greatest extent possible so that our vacation periods are consistent with them, any days off, so that our students and students across the state who go to their geographically located vocational schools don't miss a lot of school because our calendar is misaligned with theirs. So a lot of issues, a lot of great questions, and and thoughts about vocational technical education. It's an absolute priority that I don't think the education profession in general is addressing to the extent it needs to.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And just so that you know, kind of a little more education is they have great tech teachers. So they have student mentorship. So like my son's a senior this year because Mr. Z hasn't kicked him out yet. But gotta love that Vincenzo. Anyhow, so he actually goes to woodworking even though he can't take any more classes because he's taken them all. And those teachers still help them develop their skills, seek alternate pathways, like think outside the box. Because, college isn't for everyone, but that doesn't mean that he wanted to go to the HVAC program or that he wanted to go to the welding program or whatever. So they do have those student mentorships inside too. So it's not all just missing out on vocational, which I'm not arguing is a problem because it's not as easily accessible as it is in other states. But they do try their best, and there are opportunities that the teachers work hard at providing.
Heather, I think you've been waiting a while.
Hi, Bill, thank you for adding the color commentary around why we might see the helmets in two different line items. I believe when we met, we also saw that with like world language texts for texts that were being purchased new. They were a separate line item than texts that were being repaired to prevent costs from the newer ones.
In every school district's budget, there is what appears to be some duplicity in terms of budgeting. But that's because we are required by state accounting standards to break our budget appropriations up into what are called object codes. In other words, professional salaries, clerical salaries, support salaries, materials and supplies, contract services, which is what the repair of helmets would be in, and other expenses. So there are 5 or 6 different object codes. And so we can't lump everything associated, for example, with the procurement or the repair of something that is a common item, such as a helmet, into one account, because of the state accounting requirements require us to break that down into those respective object codes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did just have one question, and I don't know if you had a chance to follow up, but around the reading materials, we were talking about the number of students that are currently needing remedial reading instruction, and also if there's a projection for whether we see an increase. I know there's been a lot done to especially help our earlier kids have that strong foundation to reduce the numbers eventually. But I was just wondering if you had a chance to get any of those numbers for us.
So the reading text and materials that are in here are for a multitude of classrooms per se. They're for English foundations classes, they're for the remedial reading classes, they're for our specialized programs, and those include the abridged versions of text, graphic novels. There's also a huge call for inventories and consumables for functional skills as well as post-secondary career opportunity skills or finding, their niche. So that's all in there, in addition with the remedial reading teacher materials as well, which is a standalone class. I think if we looked at all of those different classes and the kids in the foundations and the specialized programs, there's about 45 to 50 students.
Thank you. That's
Okay.
helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. On page 11, the first line item on that page in regard to the field trips, the proposed budget for 24 is down by $550. Are you able to speak why that cost went down? I would think we would want to increase that by doing more field trips to colleges and job fairs and everything for these kids.
It's actually an example of more authentic budgeting, in that what was done through the guidance line item in the past for special ed students has now been separated out, so it's specific to the special ed department. So the trips are still going on. In fact, even more trips are going on than the past, but it's more appropriately documented in the budget.
Thank you. One last question. When Dan gave his report, he talked about the Mandarin courses as well as the Arabic. I think he had mentioned 26 students overall that are enrolled in the Mandarin and 15 students in the Arabic. Are those 4 classes altogether? Or is it how many courses of each are being offered?
There are 4 sections of Mandarin, and there are only 3 sections of Arabic. Students in Arabic 3 and 4 are combined.
And so is that the 15 students overall in those courses?
For Arabic.
Yes.
Yes, for Arabic.
Are there any plans to increase that enrollment? Or why are we running more lowly enrolled ones in that regard?
Sure. Enrollments are not limited, so it's student interest in all classes, and determining sizes and sections are based on student requests. So we do the world language department head has gone down to the middle school in the past when we do pre-enrollment to talk about the different languages and whether you really need to be in Spanish 2 or repeat Spanish 1, for example, or also try Latin or try Mandarin or try Arabic as well.
I think that answers my
Okay,
question.
thank you.
I'd like to build on that a little bit. The language programs are a tricky one. They come up often because they're so important, and yet enrollments can be tricky in one direction or another. I was actually wondering if our school board liaison could talk a little bit to that and what your goals are in terms of those programs, their coverage, what they provide to students.
We haven't got that far yet, so I can't really speak to much the school board having talked about it much at all. We did just start talking, and it may have been our last, or it was when the high school presented to us. They gave us some numbers on which classes. Lori Rothaus asked the question. I think it was which classes had fewer than 12 people enrolled. So actually, I have that list right in front of me. And Arabic and Mandarin were definitely the biggest kind of ones on there. That the other ones all seemed to be like, you have like 10 sections of something and one of them happens to not have very many students in it. But so no, shorter answer is we have not yet looked at that. We've been more focused on like the general curriculum at the lower levels and making sure that that's kind of up to snuff, and we haven't moved on to high school yet.
Thank you. Anybody else? Lee.
Early in Dan's presentation, he touched base on the eHall Pass. and that you guys had looked into it a little bit. It's been a minute since I've been in high school, so I'd just like to be a little more educated on how the hall monitors work and how eHall Pass would either supplement or replace that. If you could talk to that, I'd appreciate it.
So the hall monitors are placed, like as Dan said, strategically kind of in the most busiest hallways, outside bathrooms. So those became duties for teachers, just like a study hall or a CAF duty. And we've implemented that at kind of the end of last year. We tried to in full on this year. And it's made a world of difference. All teachers now are required to give passes. Those hall monitors check the passes. We're out in the hallways too, we check them. And I will say the teachers and the students have really risen to the occasion carrying the passes with them. The hall pass, I have previously worked with something similar to that. We used a QR code, which filtered into a Google Doc, and administration or nurses could see where the kids are. And I believe, but the hall pass that their middle school is talking about has so much more to offer. We're very interested, but I think we're waiting to see how their pilot goes. And they're going to give us information. So we're definitely keeping the door open for those conversations.
Thanks. Again, it's been a minute since I've been in high school, so
No problem.
it's a foreign entity to me to understand how that all works. But thank you for enlightening.
Sure.
I thought of something that I wanted to add to my answer to your last question because I made it seem like we weren't doing anything at the high school. The board's priority at the high school the last year and some change has really been graduation rate. And so we were focusing on getting that Pathways to Graduation up and running, program up and running, and getting the ELOs up and running. And that was why we hadn't sort of looked at other things in that curriculum yet.
Thank you.
Thank you for meeting with us the other day. It was a lot of useful information and something that I've thought about since. I'm sorry I didn't get to ask it the day that we met. And I don't know if Amy might be able to help a little bit because you also just said something that like added to my question, I believe. So it's in regard to the PSATs. And I had a lot of questions around this as well. And so one of the things I just wanted to point out is I did ask if this was a typical thing that other districts do in the area or New Hampshire. And it was said that yes, typically just at 10th grade though. So we're trying it for 9th and 10th. And I get that to try and, bring in some data. The part that I didn't think to ask about was how is a 9th and a 10th grader, is that aligning to curriculum at the state level? And Amy, you just said too that the SATs are used as a standardized test, at the junior level. And I guess I didn't realize that. Disclosure, I'm not from New Hampshire, so a lot of this, the educational standards and such at a state level, I'm not fully up to speed yet on. So would you be able to provide a little bit more information on how these tests will be able to help identify those areas of where, we're in need of curriculum or not, and how that ties in at the state level as well, maybe?
Yeah, so to start with the SATs, it is, so under the No Child Left Behind Act, we have to provide some type of accountability assessment. In New Hampshire, as Jill said earlier, they have gone through a lot of iterations. I think I've been around for, let's see, we can play the game. We can play NEAP, NECAP, Smarter Balanced, SAS, which is none of that is, it's all these strange acronyms. And so they just decided, which I think was a good idea when Smarter Balance went away, to just let's use an assessment that's already normed that we don't have to pay either Measured Progress or some other company. So that's how they settled on the SATs. The SATs are aligned to the Common Core state standards, so it's a nationally recognized assessment, and the PSATs are as well. So when we had demonstrated success, who is a partner not only with the DOE, they go into school districts and help them unpack their data. We did a data dive, and they were actually the ones that I think started the conversation. The department head for both math and English came to that data dive, and we're really looking at, well, if we had this information with as freshmen, we would really be able to target our instruction more, because what they're able to do is to say, here are your SAT results, here's your vocabulary results. So if you know anything about the Common Core, they look at structure, literacy, they look at literacy, nonfiction, fiction, and then author's purpose, setting, all of the literary elements. They really break it down and ask questions, both multiple choice and constructed responses. So from that information, what a department head can do is to say, well, if we look at their results on the SAT and backtrack to, say, freshman year, here's what we should be teaching to freshmen and sophomores so that we can improve those areas when they're juniors. But that's so far away. And so there's a lot of learning loss that you're sort of guessing, because the juniors that take it one year are going to be vastly different than the population of students that take it the next year. So that's where we started to think about using the PSATs. Initially, we were just going to do it with sophomores, but then we also realized that the freshmen don't have anything. Some districts, as I mentioned, that were using STAR, used STAR as their last data point for freshmen. And when we switched to iReady is a K-8 tool. So we just really felt like it wasn't appropriate. But those assessments are aligned to state and national standards for English language arts. And then there is the social studies piece that goes into the English language arts standards as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. And one thing, and I haven't heard it in a while, but so one thing I just wonder about is, are we teaching to a test, or are we teaching to, the core curriculum that needs to be taught? Because SATs are a much different assessment. Mm-hmm. And PSATs are a much different assessment than just getting down to, does the student know, the material? And I guess that would just be my one, is it a true reflection of, what we should be doing versus not?
Yeah, I would say right now, and I'll let Jill and Rich jump in, I think the SATs are really hard to teach too. I think this idea, because their bank of items is so large, I do think that they have prep books that really focus on vocabulary, the roots of words. I mean, if you've taken, I know that Lee said he's been a minute since he was in high school. I agree. There's been a lot of changes in the SAT, since the people in this room took it. I think it's a really hard test, at least in my opinion, to teach to, because there's not only so many items, but you just never know the kinds of questions that you're going to get. It's really not, if you look at the depth of knowledge types of questions. So when we look at DOK 1, 2, 3, and 4, there's very little depth of knowledge 1 on the SATs, where you're just saying, what does this word mean? You get some of that, but a lot of it is really, can you take this information and synthesize it or compare it and contrasting, which is a much higher level of depth of knowledge. So I think it would be a real challenge for students or even teachers to teach to the test. I think the conversations that I had with Bill Maniotis and Ron DeLude, who are the department chairs, they were very thoughtful and more about, for example, numbers and operations are the core of what you teach in math. If kids can't compute, it's going to be really hard for them to solve any problem that comes their way. If they're adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and then can they manipulate with rational numbers, both positive and negative? That's all over the SATs. So you really do have to target your instruction, because the other questions that they get they're not going to get the right answer unless you target those areas. So I think those were the conversations that they were having about what are the core competencies we would have in English 9 and 10, and Algebra 1 and Geometry, because those are the courses that are most reflective of the PSATs and the SATs. That's a lot of information. Okay. Sure. Anything I missed?
I was just going to add that the relevancy is certainly there for the curriculum, but it also helps target some of those skills that are necessary to build upon each other to get to that higher level learning. So it's not necessarily teaching to the test, it's really building upon those skills, almost like scaffolding. And it really does help drive the teacher's instruction, because there's such a large array of banks of questions and concepts that are within it, that teachers can kind of use that to build like a whole lesson and, differentiate as well. So in addition to that, what I think we're going to find really, really helpful with the data is as we go through our Tier 2 and Tier 2 intervention process, we can identify students at risk, but when we do that now, we look at the data that's coming up with them, and it just kind of stops. And sometimes, to your point, do they really take the test seriously? Sometimes there's discrepancy, but then that other data point is going to be really important for us to say, the student is, always absent, or he's failing 3 classes. What is the motive? What's the driving cause for that? And that's really helpful for us to have that data to figure that out, so we can look at next steps for the kids. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you. And if I can do one more follow-up question, and I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, probably nobody will until 1, 2, or 3 years down the road. But how do we think it's going to transition to go from iReady into another assessment for the PSATs, moving into the SATs? How do you see that transition working?
I would say, I think that we live in a time where students are used to being on a device to be able to take an assessment. For better or worse, we start at the kindergarten level now with either on an iPad or a Chromebook to meet the assessment requirements. And so I think the things that will be similar is that it's on the device. They'll use their ClassLink or however they log in. But one of the reasons we also talked about administering the PSAT to freshmen is it is a transition. They will likely have never seen a test like the PSAT before they take it in March. Some kids do opt to take it sooner and they pay for that. But as far as the typical student that is we're looking to progress monitor, it will be a huge change for them. We do know, and that's released by the College Board, that kids that take that type of test more than once, just test familiarity, they get used to it, they're able to pace themselves, they get used to the types of questions that are being asked. The College Board has a lot of follow-up material and prep material. If you've taken the PSAT once and you have this score, these are the areas that you could work on, and they provide that kind of material. But I think that Jill and Rich and Steve and the rest of the teachers, it'll be a real shift for them as freshmen. And then I think when they take it as sophomores, some of them will say, oh, I remember doing this. Yes, the test is long. I better bring an extra snack. I should bring additional scratch paper, wear layer. They just get used to taking it because it is a different assessment. The protocol and the not just the confidentiality, but the protocols, the assessment protocols, just like SAS, they have to go through teachers and the proctors have to go through a training to say, you can't leave the room. They really do have to keep it confidential. They can't have any devices. And we don't really run up against a lot of that when they're taking iReady, I would say, that you don't really have a 4th grader that's trying to look up an answer on their phone. But that would happen at the high school if we don't have these really strict protocols in place. So.
Thank you for the answer.
On the last page 35, on line item 8890, those funds have pretty much remained the same. But in regard to like the NEASC accreditation, and you also mentioned those funds go towards some other programs. Do you have an idea of how much of the funds go toward the NEASC accreditation and what other funds are used in regard to the other programs offered and what those might be?
I apologize, I'm not aware of the numbers that attach to NEASC. Do you know that? If not, we can certainly get them to you.
That would be great.
I think
That's
just
fine.
an idea.
Okay.
That would be awesome. And then one more question, page 22, under the community relations, line item 8611-31. Can you talk about what the $1,200 increase is on that line item?
Can you repeat that page number? I'm sorry.
It's line item 8611. Yes. Page 22. There's a $1,200 increase on that line item.
Is that the English?
That's under like the community relations.
Oh, right here.
Page 22 for the 24 to 25 proposed. Oh, that's a guest speaker. Did I?
No,
I was
no.
like, what?
No.
No, that was
the end
good.
of my budget, my line.
I was like, did I miss something?
Or challenge day or something.
Right. Well, one thing that I do notice, I don't have the exact breakdown of the 4 different items that are listed, that for many years, because of COVID and other reasons, we've not had an exchange student at the high school. We've had interest and sort of reach out for that again, so we'd like to get it going again. I think it's something that our students benefit by seeing students from other cultures in our building. So that is help supplement the reintroduction of that program.
Thank you, Rich.
Is it always like, sorry, is it also like the other, the elementary schools and the middle schools where they're increased their police department presence at certain things when you have a lot of people at the school? Do you guys fall into that category for this line item as well? No, Matt's behind you shaking his head. He's shaking his head no.
That line item does not cover that.
Okay.
Often if we have additional police officers at certain events, it's in, whether it's an athletic event or whether it's a
Okay. It would be
graduation, it's
specific.
in that specific category.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So I have one more question, and actually, Dan, this goes a little bit more to you, I think. You had some strong words in part of the notes that you had in terms of using the word padding and redundancy and pieces of that sort. And I wasn't clear by the time you finished speaking whether those had been clarified to comfort levels for the liaison group, or if you considered that to be still outstanding, barring where and when the tech pieces were put in which line, because I think that's a different issue.
No, coming from a corporate background, I've dealt with budgets, and there are red flags that go off when you see things budgeted in a number of areas. And I said that right up front to them when we opened. And I said on a second and subsequent reading, I could see the helmets showing up in 2 different places with 2 different things, but the narrative didn't explain what that was. I think it was our responsibility to question that. The biggest question, of course, was the computer, and it was accelerated by coming off a computer meeting that just 2 days before. And you see so many lines of computer items, and Jason sitting upstairs with an enormous budget, and you're wondering, why are these here? Should these be put together? Should there be some other acclamation to this? And as we asked this, the answer was the board asked the same questions. So I think it's a legitimate thing there. If I asked tough questions and they seemed firm or something, I'm sorry, but that was my job in this instance. And I think that you gave very good answers, and I respect all of you, including Steve, though, this is our give us Barabbas moment because he didn't show up. But
You're so
no.
mean, Dan.
And I think that my question is, I think the questions that you asked and the points that you raised are valid, absolutely, and well worth asking. I think I was trying to get more of a sense of whether you felt that they had been answered and satisfied. And again, setting aside whether or not certain tech things belong in a different part, which line they should be under, but just the concepts of whether or not there was exaggerated or redundancy. So was that answer to your satisfaction?
In all instances except in the computer. And I think with the number of items you had, including in Jason's budget and in this budget, you could have things being hidden and being redundant. And I have nowhere in looking at it from the view that I had to make that judgment.
Thank you.
Dan, the technology budget historically in school districts is one of the most confusing.
Still.
Yes, and I agree, because there are certain things that we want to budget in a district-wide account that have a commonality across grade levels. And then there are technology appropriations that we budget
uniquely to a school that pertains specifically to a curriculum item or a maintenance and repair item in a school. So what we'll do is we'll provide the school board and you with as much explanation as possible as to why certain technology appropriations are budgeted in a more global account and why they're budgeted sometimes in a site-based budget. Absolutely legitimate questions.
Yeah, agreed. But I think some of the narrative is going to have to be changed because it looks the same in both budgets. And with Jason sitting in the high school and their explanation that on many of these, it's a committee of teachers and Jason is on those committees.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that what they said made a lot of sense, but the narratives of what was in Jason's budget versus the narrative of what was in the high school budget were so similar that you sat there questioning, why is this here and not there? Or there
Yeah,
and not
oftentimes, and Matt would tell you this also, in reporting to the state, we have to report not only on a district-wide basis, but more specifically on a site basis also. What are we spending per school and for certain appropriations for whether it's commodities or contract services, et cetera.
Yeah, things can appear to look that way. Jason, we chose to consolidate a lot of the technology under him. A lot of what he's buying is cabling Reed's Ferry Elementary School. You know, it had, when we first did it 20 years ago, that cabling is no good anymore. He's talking about storage area networks, SANs, 60 grand a piece. You know, he's talking about switches, he's talking about routers, he's talking about closets, he's talking about Microsoft licensing, he's talking about a lot of stuff. The ID machine at the high school that's at the desk, he's not talking about that because that's specific to the high school, okay? There's a lot of the software and hardware that is specific to a building. And in the end, as Bill stated, when I report out, I've got my DOE 25, which used to be 20 pages long when I first started. It's now 56 pages long. And I have to cost out each school. So I'm going to take Jason's $1.2 million. I'm going to apportion it out to all the schools because it can't sit there. It has to be attributed to the schools. So whenever we can provide some specificity to where things really belong, it only helps us in being more accurate as opposed to me taking a ratio based upon number of students and spreading it out because now we have to report by school. This is new around 4 years ago, just started. They always think of something new, the DOE. They like to keep us busy.
Well, you don't do anything else.
I'll also add.
So.
I know.
Matt, and I'll also add, I think, no, you're fine to sit down. You don't have to stand for me, unless you had to stand for something else, but. No, a couple of years ago, I think Jason had presented to the building and planning about, how far behind we were in tech. And he came in and he's like, I know these are going to be big numbers, but, this is the least we can get away with to support all the Chromebooks that we added during COVID and everything else. So I'm with you. The discrepancy and the narrative we got to figure out, but I'd bet that that's going to continue to increase every year.
Oh my gosh. I mean, Bill knows this too, but when you first build a network, everybody goes, phew, that's done. Now we don't have to touch it for 20 years. Wrong. You have to maintain that. You have a life cycle of machines. We used to keep computers, classroom computers, administrative computers, everything like that for 10, 15 years. My God, I'm sitting there with a 5 1/4 floppy trying to boot my system to do all these budget reports. Is that a good thing? No, it's not. So we have to have a life cycle based upon what the machines are used for. There are some power users like office people and whatever, or scheduling, guidance department at the high school, power school. There's some software in the high school account for plugins for Power School. That helps them do their specific schedule because it's so complex. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to divide out what we can
and let Jason take the heavy lift as far as all the infrastructure goes. But I agree, the wording could be better, more clarified, and give a more accurate representation of what we're doing. I agree with you.
If we promoted this discussion, we have done what we needed to do.
I just wanted to end the evening, if all questions are done, by thanking Dan for presenting our liaison meeting. We much appreciate the summary that you provided for us. And I especially want to thank Amy, Matt, and Bill for being here for answering a majority of our questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We should start doing that. On a broader note, it occurs to me, based on these conversations, two things. First, I think this emerges in part from changing uses of the term technology, as in, it occurs to me that it's becoming similar to saying, but we have paper in so many different places in the budget. It's not one thing. Certain elements of technology are classroom stuff, and certain elements are infrastructure. But your point is well taken that that's not clarified in the narrative as well. I was wondering if it would be, if there is a relatively simple way of giving us, providing in the relatively near future, a written sense of where things fall and why, just in broad categories, what tends to go in the main budget, what tends to go in others, that might be helpful to the group. Would that be?
Yes, Matt and I were talking a short while ago, and we're going to provide that to you. We're also going to provide it to the school board, because if you have those questions, school board has those questions. If both committees have those questions, then 3,000 people in the public will have those questions also. So if you could, Naomi, if you could provide us after this meeting, and as we continue forward with that list of questions that you'd like responses to. I have to tell you how much we respect and appreciate all the work that you put into this. There is no bad question. There is no bad commentary, because you're taxpayers and you're representing others in this community. You're not only representing students and our staff, but the community. And our job is to provide those answers. And we take that seriously, and just know that you could be doing a lot of other things, a lot of days, a lot of nights such as this, but you got to know how much we really appreciate and respect what you put into this, because it's really terrific.
And I know that I appreciate very much the responsiveness, because the documents that we have received in return have been prompt, have been thorough, and I know they've not always been easy to create, even if they're provided to us as if they were. So thank you. Okay, we're into the run-up now. Next meeting is on Tuesday, January 29th, same time.
Madam Chairperson, I think Tuesday, January 30th. I don't think January 29th, according to my calendar, is not a Tuesday.
Who would be willing to double-check their calendar on a smart device, please?
I have the 30th.
Yes.
Because the 29th is
I.
a Monday.
Yes.
30th is a Tuesday. Dan's
Oh,
correct.
Yeah.
Dan's correct. That's two monumental things tonight.
The number of correctnesses is growing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
The 30th, indeed. And we will send out an email to make sure that others who just look at the agenda might not be aware of that will. Do we have any other public participation tonight? Seeing none, I will close public participation. Do we have any committee comments?
Just because I know everyone is riveted about the district-wide review, the liaison meeting is set for next Thursday, the 25th at 4:30 in the high school conference room. But if you come and you're not on the committee, you have to bring snacks.
Have to bring a what? Snack?
Snacks.
Oh, jeez.
We'll have a snack sign-in sheet. Yes.
There you go. But Pat will be sending that out. We just said it today. But I know there were a lot of people that asked me to let them know, so now I'm letting you know.
Thank you. Any other committee comments?
Oh, geez. But you'll send questions.
That means you bring the snacks, Ellen.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing nothing else, shall we have a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Second. All those in favor? Any opposed?
I'm so
Abstentions?
bummed, Shane. You didn't motion.
All finished. Thank you very much, folks. Have a great evening.